Welcome back to Nothing But Nets. Welcome. I'm joined again with my NBA expert analysis, Nate. Want to respond to the Sports Illustrated article that I'll link in the description. Has Sean Marks overplayed his hand here in this Cam Johnson trade? All the trade rumors have seemed to stall. It looked like the Okoro deal that Cleveland was in the works. I was kind of expecting that to happen. Now everything has kind of hit the brakes. Nate, are the Nets stuck with Cam Johnson for the foreseeable future, or at least to start the season?
Possibly, yeah, for sure. I think you had a guest on, Pete. I enjoyed his
Pete
time on the
from
show.
Nets fan, Pete's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he had under as his answer to like point 0.5 for I think you might have said vets traded, but I think Cam Johnson might be included in that.
Yeah.
And I somewhat agree, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as your kind of intro kind of hinted at. Like we like to rip Cam Johnson or we have the last couple times you and I have been on, but like he's not as bad of a player as we've been making out to be. He's kind of like spoiled out for Nets fans, but like looking at his contract, his age, his as you always like to allude to, his height, 6'9". But the guy's still a 6'9" wing who could shoot 40% from three, who again is not the greatest defender in the world, who is not a great rebounder for his size, but he can get the job done on the defensive end. He's not a liability, i.e. a Cam Johnson, or I'm sorry, a Cam Thomas, another Cam on the Nets. So I think we've given him kind of the short end of the stick on the type of player that he is. His contract isn't great, but in 2 years, in a year and a half, even and 12 months, it's not going to be as bad. It's a league where the cap is always going up, and he's making what 25 a year, and most 3 and D guys are making upwards of 20 plus anyway, and that's essentially what he is. He's not a Mikal Bridges or an Anunoby, those elite star role players that we talked about in your last stream, but like he can get the job done for a lot of teams, and I still think there's tons of teams. I thought of I think the Kings were rumored in the article you sent me, and I think that's a team that would just it seemed like a different wing every night was if Herter could get minutes or if Barnes was going to they just seem to not have a guy that could fit, but they obviously need a guy like a just more lots of teams need 3 and D players, and I don't think we're in as bad a situation if he is on the roster. And I think no, Sean Marks is holding out because he wants proper value, so to speak.
That was kind of my next question. And I want to touch on a couple of things you said. You mentioned that we have been ripping on Cam Johnson, and we have. And I want to point out two things. This is not the rip on Cam Johnson podcast. I just call it like I see it. I've been ripping on Cam Johnson since the trade, and I ripped on Bridges too. And I was wrong about Bridges, and I admit that I was one. Bridges is so much more than a 3 and D guy. Mid-range Mikal is a very good player, and I thought they were getting 2 3 and D wings, which they kind of did, but Mikal's a lot more than that. Cam Johnson might even be worse than I expected because he's not a bad defensive player. But we were sold a bill of goods that we were getting a lockdown wing defender. That is certainly not the case. He's also, look, I've been ripping on Cam Johnson since the KD trade. This is a guy that Jay Crowder quit the Suns over. Losing time to Cam Johnson made him quit the Suns. That's what his kind of colleagues thought of him. He can't finish. He can't rebound. I'm just not a fan. You're right. His contract, when they signed the contract.
Gary, to be fair, you said this is not the Rip Cam Johnson podcast, and then you proceed to rip Cam Johnson.
Because I don't think he's a very good player. I don't value him
I hear
at
you.
all. I'd rather just play Jalen Wilson. I don't know what I have in Jalen Wilson. Cam Johnson is 28 years old, I think he is. I already know what he is and what he isn't. He's a stationary shooter who's 6'8". He's a stationary shooter who plays like he's 6'5". Like it's what he is, a 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is. That's what he is. I don't have any more patience for him. And it's frustrating to me that he's still on this roster after allegedly rumored, and we never know what rumors are true, that the Pistons offered a 2026 first round pick. Getting a pick like that, a non-protected, which certainly seems like it's going to be a lottery pick knowing the Pistons, those days are gone. Is that fair to assess? Getting an unprotected potential lottery pick would be, those days are gone. for Cam Johnson?
I mean, phone calls are free. If they might be, but it's still worth a shot if to call back the Pistons if that is the case.
It's how nice would that be now to have a 2020, because they have their pick in 2026, which will likely be a lottery pick. To have 2 lottery picks in 2026 plus all the other draft capital would be nice. Here's my question about Sean Marks. I'll just kind of leave this open ended. Does Sean Marks suck at trades?
The superstar trades is tough to go to gauge because a lot of it is other people forcing his hand, so to speak, with the James Harden both in and out, so to speak. That kind of comes back to bite them, but I would need to see all the evidence to be honest. I can't give you I don't want to give you a black and white yes or no just to be dramatic, but he hasn't made any stellar trades in that I remember.
The Suns
I'll
trade,
give you that much.
the Suns picks for the Rockets pick. Would we say that's a really good trade? Like, I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
like.
yeah. Sure. Getting that pick back was awesome. Yeah, yeah. We've always spoke about this offseason. That was the trade of the offseason,
So, I mean,
not the
I
Mikal
don't,
Bridges trade.
which I like too, but that's just undoing. That's just undigging your grave to me. You don't get credit for that,
Sure,
right?
sure, sure.
If you break something and then fix it, you don't get credit for fixing it. You broke it. The James Harden trade, I didn't like. The Kyrie Irving, then the Ben Simmons trade. So the Harden trade to get Harden, I didn't like. The trade to trade Harden for Simmons, I thought was unnecessary. And then the Kyrie Irving trade, there were better deals on the table, and I didn't like the KD trade. So I'm just saying there's a history here of bad trades. But what I would really point to are the trades that aren't made. There were rumored that Lakers offered 2 first round, and they were future, they were out. 2 first round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith. And then the rumor that there was the Pistons offered a 2026 first for Cam Johnson. And the fact that both those guys are on the roster, they're making about $40 million between the two of them. And now you're looking to tank just a couple of months later. That is a gross misassessment of your team, is it not?
If those 2 rumors are correct, yes, you have to at least make one of them. Um, but just to play contrarian, like you do need players. You can't just collect draft picks. Like you can't as much as OKC and Sam Presti was just collecting first round draft picks. He always had some talent on the floor. It was never. I don't remember OKC having this bad of a roster where they're just accepting a tanking season as the Nets are. I could be mistaken there.
I'm trying
So,
to think the
but yeah,
first year,
one of those
20,
trades, if you can get a first round pick, should have been made.
to me, the trade for Dorian Finney-Smith. Now I want both of them, right? Because I want Noah Clowney on the court. And as long as Dorian Finney-Smith is on the team, Dorian Finney-Smith has to play. So the only way to get Clowney starters minutes, which I want to get him, I want to get Clowney 30 minutes a game, at least to start the season, see where he's at. And I want to get him on the floor with Claxton, is to trade Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Because Dorian Finney-Smith, honestly, is probably your second best player. I know that doesn't sound great, but he probably is. So
On the
and
Nets
he's
right
here,
now,
and yeah, I kind of think so.
like offensively or just
Just all
overall
around,
player.
as if you were picking players off the Nets, if you were saying I want this net, I want that net, how many of them would you really pick? I think kind of the argument you made for Bridges on that debate we had. I think Dorian Finney-Smith is going to play for any playoff team. Dorian Finney-Smith has a role on almost any team in the NBA. Good team, bad team, whatever it is. Finney-Smith's going to contribute to that team. So I'm just saying, like, how many nets would you really
I
take?
appreciate you bringing my arguments back around. You keep echoing them. I really do appreciate that.
When you make a good argument, you make a good argument. I still think you're wrong on the value of LeVert. I think LeVert's
But
a much
that's
better
a
player than
knock
you
on
give him
Cam
credit for.
Thomas then, right? That's a knock on Cam Thomas if you think Dorian Finney-Smith is the second best player.
No, because I was saying Cam is the first.
Well, then I'm sorry. Then that's a knock on Nick Claxton. I was thinking Nick Claxton.
You got that right. And I don't hate Claxton, but I was like, how many teams and how many playoff teams is Nick
A lot.
Claxton going to
All of
start
them.
for?
All of them.
The
Well,
Nuggets.
no, you didn't say start for. Dorian Finney-Smith is not starting for all of them.
He's starting for a lot of them, Nate. He's not a he's a positive player, right? Like, okay, if
Yeah,
you want
but
to
so is
say
Nick
he's
Claxton.
third,
Nick
okay.
Claxton's a positive player.
If you want to say Dorian Finney-Smith is the third best player on the team behind Claxton, I accept that. I'm not gonna debate you back on that. I'm fine with that. But he's in that group of players. Dorian Finney-Smith's he can defend your best wing. He can hit the three. He can rebound and he can get to the foul line. He can do so many things that Cam Johnson can't do. Like, I look at Dorian Finney-Smith and I see him similar to a fashion where I view Crowder for all those years. Like, that's a pretty good player. That's going to help good teams.
Yeah, you're right. But I just we've yet to see what Nick Claxton can do impacting a playoff series, especially surrounded by good players. Like, this is the guy. This is the premier big man to switch and guard guards on the perimeter. Like, those are the shots. Like, Nick Claxton in the finals. If Luka's looking for switches, usually he's going for that bit or that week. If Nick Claxton gets a switch, like he's got as good a chance as anyone to contest and even like block a shot. Like, he's that good. So I want to see how Nick Claxton this year can develop offensively. Like, if he can develop that, like, I'm gonna bring up his name, Gary, on a Nets podcast. If he can develop that like Hartenstein push shot and that threat from that within 12 to 15 feet range,
Yeah.
he's gonna be an absolute. He's gonna impact winning in the playoffs.
I don't dislike Hartenstein. I think Hartenstein's a good player. I was saying that whole season that Hartenstein was more valuable than Robinson. I don't dislike Hartenstein at all. I think he's a good player. And look, you're right. Like, it seems like Nick is a fluid athlete. He should be able to develop some type of offensive game. He's been in the league 5 years and he hasn't developed anything. He hasn't even gotten better as a free throw shooter. And I'm not I like Nick Claxton. I'm glad he's here. But realistically, I don't see that. I don't see him developing anything because it's been 5 years and he's the same player today as he was when he was 19. Like, I'm not trying
push
to.
shot. That's all I'm asking for. A push shot.
You're not asking for too much. I'm agreeing with you. You're not asking for a lot. I'm going to tamper my expectations that he develops that shot. He's good. He's 25.
Jason Kidd can develop a three ball in his 10th year. Nick Claxton can develop a little push shot from 8 feet from the basket in his 5th year.
Hopefully. I mean, I hope. I don't say that he can't. What I'm saying is he got paid. Does he want to? It's more of does he want to?
Yeah, you have Ben Simmons trauma. You have Ben Simmons trauma as a Nets fan, but let's be honest. Like, most basketball players, like he still hasn't had his moment. He still hasn't had his moment in the playoffs. It's a guy who has gotten better since he's been in the league. I'm not gonna this is not gonna be the shit on Nick Claxton podcast today.
I definitely don't think what you're asking him to develop is too much. I think he could develop that in one offseason. Like, if you wanted to start working today by November or October 27th, whenever the season starts, I think he could easily have that shot with the kind of athlete he is. And he's young enough that where it shouldn't be that hard to develop something. Like, you don't have to break that many bad habits. I don't think it would be a difficult thing to do. I'm just saying I'm a little skeptical on it. Back to Cam Johnson. It looked like Cleveland, that trade, it came from net sources that trade was close to done, and they were bickering over how many second rounders were going to be added and what second rounders were going to be added. According to Cavs sources, they really weren't that interested in that deal. I know what me and you think of Cam Johnson. Is Sean Marks drastically overestimating how Cam Johnson is viewed to the rest of the NBA world?
I don't know. It's similar to the first question, but no. What was the rumored trade? How many seconds in Okoro?
So it had come Okoro and 2 2s, and the Nets wanted 3 2s unless they could get the next 2. It was basically 2 2s, but what years were they going to get the second round picks in seemed to be what was holding up a trade. To me, that's kind of silly thing to hold up a trade of that magnitude. Is whether it's 2026 or 2027 or 2028, does it really matter? Like, does it matter that much? And that's why I did think that trade was going to get done. turns out that Cleveland kind of assessed that trade differently and said it was never that serious of a discussion.
If that's the case, if it wasn't that serious of a discussion, then it wasn't that serious of a discussion. I don't if it's an extra second round pick, then yeah, he's probably being stingy. If he wants the player, he wants the player. Like that's obviously the asset in that deal because if Okoro plays well for the Nets, if he takes a step up offensively and on a team where it's not Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland dribbling the shot clock out the entire time and he's sitting in the corner, he could take a step forward where he's then a net in 2026, 2027. I think I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts. Um, so yeah, if it's for two twos versus three twos, he's being stingy. And if he wants the player, he should go for the player. If he doesn't like a Okoro for some reason, fine, move on. And if you want the first round picks, if you're going for something else, then go for that. But if it's over a second round pick, then yeah, absolutely, he's overvaluing or whatever the term is you want to use for Cam Johnson. Being stingy is what I would say.
Just your personal opinion, and there's no wrong answer here. Is that a good trade for the Nets? Okoro and let's say two twos, regardless of what years you get the second round picks or second round picks. Is that a good trade for the Nets? Does that make the Nets?
I would do it because of they like I said they did the Mikal Bridges trade, so you're gonna have your selection of two guys in the teens or 20s next year from the Knicks and Bucks. You're gonna have your own lottery pick. So like if you like guys in the draft next year, you're gonna be able to get them, or you want to move up to 15 with your twos and like someone you're gonna be able to get them. If you like Okoro the player, you get Okoro the player. Like that was the same point I was making in the Mikal Bridges trade. Like I wanted to do some McBride or something out of it, or a Jericho Sims or a player that I like that's young and that could develop. So if Isaac Okoro is that guy and I like him, I would take the swing on him. It's almost like getting a first round draft pick for a year on a 1 year contract, so to speak. And I've told you this about Okoro. Like, I feel like he's never been able to play with confidence in the league. And that's in the NBA. Obviously, you need to have confidence. And guys that play with confidence, it could change your whole career. So I would love to see him play in a situation where the coaches say, yeah, we want you to create. Yeah, we want you. You know what I'm saying? Versus on Cleveland, it's no, 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 no. And when you're a high selection on a team by that specific franchise, it's kind of just we've seen it with all of our franchise with the Jets, with the Knicks, with the Nets, with other franchises, other sports. Like sometimes you just need to get away from that initial expectations, and the fans are always on you. And now that he's found a new home, like obviously, if he has a good first 20 games with the Nets fans would fall in love with Isaac Okoro. It's not, but in Cleveland, he's a top 10 pick that has a certain amount of expectations that finally is living up to them in his fourth or fifth year, if that makes sense.
It does, and I wanted to answer this question because we're both big Jets fans. Who has messed up their team? Now, the Jets and the Nets are two teams obviously heading in very, very different directions, right?
Polar. Don't ask what I think you're gonna ask. Just don't do it.
Who screwed up their current situation more? Sean Marks with still having these guys on the roster, or Joe Douglas with the Hassan Reddick situation? Who screwed up their situation more?
I don't blame Joe Douglas for any of this, so no. I think Joe Douglas saw this coming impossible. Hassan Reddick has no leverage, and he's making no money if he wants to sit out this year. So he's got to play, and he's got to play for the New York Jets if he wants to make money this year, and if he wants to make money next year. So that's what he's going to do.
Okay. What do we got to do to get? What do the Nets have to do to get Leon Rose here? What do we have to do to make that possible? Can we just triple the salary? We got the money. Just pony it up. Why can't the Nets get a respectable GM? Why is it always got to be Billy King, Sean Marks?
How about this? Why don't you learn from what the Knicks did, and maybe go for that player agent that has the connections. Like Leon Rose was an agent for years, and he's getting a lot of guys through connections. I mean, one of them helps to have your son be the agent for Jalen Brunson, and that relationship with Rick Brunson, who I think might have been his first player when Leon Rose was an agent.
Yeah.
So yeah, that helps. But if there is another player agent out there, so to speak, that has lots of relationships that can get Anthony Edwards agent wants to become a GM, and then in a couple, you know what I'm saying? where it's the NBA is a relationship business. Like we see it all the time. Like Sean Marks was not the reason why KD and Kyrie got here, right? There was partly because of the roster, but it wasn't solely a relationship with Sean Marks. But yeah, maybe they could take a feather out of that hat.
Which I thought Kenny Atkinson had a big part of why they were here, and his system of play, his style of play, had created excitement. But then Kyrie got
Right.
here and apparently wanted Kenny gone, which made no sense to me. And after I got Harden, I would have. I'm not going to say that in retrospect, it's not. But Kenny Atkinson is proven not to be replaceable. That's all I'm just gonna leave that there.
No, he's a great coach. I say anything bad about Kenny Atkinson.
Kenny Atkinson has had no problem landing other jobs. He's actually turned head coaching jobs down. That's what the rest of the league thinks of Kenny Atkinson. But I'm not gonna revisit my love affair with Kenny Atkinson. I got a couple other questions. Season starts in a little over 2 months. Is Cam Johnson on the roster opening day?
Yes.
Is Cam Johnson on the season? Is Cam Johnson on the roster at the end of the season?
No, I don't think so. Not if they have
Maybe a
their way.
deadline trade, you think?
There's too many young pieces. There's too many wings. There's too many. Yeah, and like I said, once the season starts, guys are going to get hurt. Teams that were okay are going to end up being better, and they might need a piece. And there's so many teams that are going to making that playoff push that just want to add a guy, and he's a guy that at that time will have 2 years left on his deal, making regular money. So and then this year, like again, he's still probably going to go back to that 15 point a game score with McCown not on the team. If he starts on the roster, he's going to score more than 15 a game. He's still a 6'9" guy. You alluded to earlier. He's not a bad defender. He can still play defense. That guy has a spot on a lot of rosters in the league as much as he's fallen out of love with Nets fans.
To me, it seems like Cleveland and Orlando would be perfect landing spots for him. Right? Those would be teams that make a lot of sense for him to go to. And if you can't get trades done there, if you can't make a Jet Howard trade, which you get Jet Howard, which is basically a first rounder because he hasn't played, right? It's like Dariq Whitehead, like he hasn't played much. So count that as a first rounder.
Let's hope he's not like Dariq Whitehead.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, right? Like in the sense that he's completely.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. He's or you can't get Jet Howard and twos, and you can't get the Okoro trade done when Cleveland seems to not be in love with Okoro. It's starting to seem to me like, is he really movable? Am I gonna have to eat some of his salary and settle for second rounders the same way I had to settle? I waited too long in trading Royce O'Neal and had to settle for second rounders for him. Is that a possibility that we're just gonna have to try to settle?
I would like to think that Sean Marks is a bit more creative than that, than to do the whole second round pick thing. Like I guess I could answer that question with a question, Gary, to you. A couple guys that have been in trade rumors. John Collins with the Jazz.
Yeah.
Would you take a first rounder from the Jazz with John Collins to give up Cam?
They're gonna give me a first rounder to take Collins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would 100. I would. I know the contract. Well, hang on. I have to do the math on that. He's got.
Give the contract's 25 with a player option. But he got a player option for next year. It's almost the same thing.
Yeah, I would do that, right? So the contract, because I'm very, very close to the first apron. So if it's going to put me over the first apron, I can't do it. But it's not going to do that. So yes, I would do that trade. I would make.
Okay.
I got.
So you swap the players, get extra first.
Yeah, I get the extra first, but I have to pay Collins.
I'll follow that up. I'll follow that up with another player. I thought you said Orlando. I think that's a good fit. Cleveland's a good fit. I think the Kings, I also mentioned that earlier, would be a good fit. Would you give him up for Kevin Huerter if you get a first round pick back? Kevin Huerter, guy that scored like 10 points a game last year, and he's still making $17 million a year for a couple years.
Yeah, I would do that. I would. Just the money I'm going to save on that gives me a little bit of breathing room with the salary cap. So, like, look, Huerter is what he is. He's a shooter. He's a stationary shooter. That's what he is. He's got a place in the NBA. He can play 15, 20 minutes a game on any roster.
Joe Harris 2.0.
And yeah, Net fans love Joe Harris. for sure. I think Joe Harris a little bit bigger, a little stronger body, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would make that trade. I'd bring in Herter for sure.
So I'm just saying, I don't know if those are options, but I would want him to be a little more creative to maybe bring in a contract or a player that a team like a playoff team like the Jazz are looking to make a push. They just got Markkanen. I'm sure Collins making that money is doesn't want to sit behind him, and Herter like he fell out of the rotation for a lot of last year and is not a playoff type guy where Cam Johnson probably could vie for playoff minutes in Sacramento. Where whatever. I would think there are more options out there to bring in a player that a team's looking to get rid of and think Cam Johnson is an upgrade. Like Cam Johnson, obviously the Kings would be an upgrade over Herter, in my opinion. So I would for them they would have to sweeten the pot a little bit to the Nets. Could they get a first round pick out of it? I don't know if it's next year's. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But I would think the GM for the Nets could be a little more creative.
That's a really interesting trade. Now, I would make that to unload Cam Johnson, and like I don't think that this is going to be shocking. Cam Johnson is the worst player in the league. I don't like his contract. I think the middle class in the NBA is shrinking. Right, you're getting $40 million deals and vet minimum deals like that. That in the middle kind of contract is kind of going by the wayside, which is kind of Cam
Yeah,
Johnson's. Like if Cam Johnson had to redo his contract today, I don't think he's getting anywhere near $25 million a year with the current CBA. It's just my thought. So if we can get rid of that contract,
probably not.
I think that's a great move for the Nets. So, and then if I can get any type of pick, I'll take in your reasonably bad contract to do that. My final question is Finney Smith, who I like, I'm a DFS fan, and Cam Johnson, who I like a lot less, are going to play as long as they're still on this roster. So two things. How much does that damage them in their rebuild? Like how many games does that equate to winning playing those two guys? And how much does it delay the evolution and the growth of guys like Jalen Wilson and Noah Klein? They're going to have to play less minutes and come off the bench because we have to play Cam Johnson in DFS.
Kareem Finney-Smith and Cam, you're saying? How much is
Yeah.
that going to impact?
How much does that impact winning? And then how much does it delay the growth and evolution of Jalen Wilson and Noah Clowney?
Neither. Neither is going to impact. They're not going to impact winning, and they're not going to impact. I mean, to an extent, obviously, a game or two, but I don't think they're going to
Yeah.
be a big impact at all in the quarter or in the season, or they're going to help you win games. They're not shot creators. They don't make others around them better. DFS will play good defense that will help you, but again, the Nets will still need Cam Thomas to score 50 that night. And then we've spoken enough about Cam Johnson, so we know who he is today. But no, it's not going to impact him enough on the court. And Jalen Wilson, if he's good enough, is going to find plenty of opportunity anyway. Where DFS might fall out of minutes, but playoff teams know the value of DFS anyway, and would kind of understand the process. But I don't think either has a major impact. And like I said, when the season starts, injuries happen. You never know what's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to. The Nets won't allow it to.
My last question for you is just this offseason, everything else aside, James Harden, the big three, Ben Simmons, all that aside, just this particular offseason, give my buddy Sean Marks a grade just on this offseason.
I mean, it's at least it's an A minus. I'll give him an A minus because when the season ended, it looked bleak. It looked bleak, right?
It looked real bad.
And
You're right about that.
This is an ironic grade because we just debated for 2.5 hours the Mikal Bridges trade, and obviously, like I said, this if we look back in a couple years and the Knicks win 2 championships, then that's become a laughing stock due to that trade. There's nothing like it in sports where the kind of the rival just handed the crosstown team the keys to 2 championships in which they've been in a drought for 50 plus years. So that kind of would change everything. But assuming that doesn't happen in Knicks land, the fact that they got those draft pick back from Houston, the fact that the Cooper Flag pick, if we can call it that at this point, um, the fact that is now a part of their team, and like Nets fans are excited to tank again, and we're not. The worst thing you want to do rooting for a team is watching your team tank, have no future because your pick is going to someone else as you watch your team tank and just young talent not be there. So I think it's exciting to watch the guys like Jalen Wilson and Claxton and Clowney and all the guys you alluded to. It's going to be fun to watch them develop, probably while losing and having that Cooper Flag pick plus the Mikal Bridges picks and everything else they acquired. So you have to like what he did, but he's always really been good around this time of if the Nets are in this type of situation, a rebuilding type of GM.
Yeah.
It was always, as you talked about with the trades earlier, it was always kind of a question, or at least it was a question to me. It was with Kenny Atkinson and Sean Marks is once they got those superstars in, like, okay, can Marks now do the GMing with this type of team, with these type of guys that are probably in his ear with who to get and who not to get, and et cetera, et cetera. And obviously same with the coach. They were in his ear with the coach too. And people were questioning could Kenny Atkinson, obviously he was good at building a program and obviously just coaching basketball, but it's different basketball when you have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Yeah, we all know this.
For sure. All right, Nate, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your intake. I was going to give Sean Marks a B this offseason, but you're right. I was completely like without hope when last season ended. One last question. Sean Marks didn't trade Cam Johnson, and he tried fired Jack Vaughn. He didn't trade Dorian Finney-Smith because last year, late last season, towards the deadline, he still viewed the Nets as a playoff or at least a play-in team. How could he have miscalculated that so badly given the roster? And B, like, is there really benefit in saying we're as good as the Bulls or the Hawks? Is there really is that where you want to be? And how did he even miscalculate that we were that good that badly?
Listen, Gary, to a guy who gives me arguments all the time about how Joe Douglas is a terrible GM because he's never made the playoffs and win, like these guys, their resume is on the line. And last year, I completely disagree. Like outside of a very bad stretch they had, I forget which month, but things got really bad for the Nets. Um, they were in it for that play-in spot, and it's the GM's job to kind of that's what he did with the kind of the baby nets of the D'Angelo Russell era and what got the big three here initially. So if Mikal Bridges blossomed in the second half to a 25 point a game scorer, um, and guys developed and they made the playoffs, and then God forbid they played good defense and Mikal Bridges had a good series, whatever happened, and they won a playoff series with Cam Thomas. You know what I'm saying? Then that's he always has to look at slightly more glass half full, and you can't just not every season is sell out and tank just because um we can't win the finals. So he's still got to do his job to an extent.
Understood. I just look at your roster, and a friend of mine asked me, "Okay, how many teams in the East do you think you're better than?" And I was like, Detroit, Washington, and now I'm out of teams, right? So I guess I understand what you're saying. He has to be more glass half full. I just saying if you're trying to be the Bulls or the Hawks, that's the position you're trying to be, and to have a bunch of veterans on bad contracts and compete for the play-in. That's a terrible spot to be in. I can guarantee you the Bulls and the Hawks don't like being the Bulls and the Hawks, and that's what you're trying to replicate. It's a bad situation.
No, but it's as I just said, like if they would have made the playoffs on the backs of Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges, they're not the Hawks. They're an up and coming team with young players doing it. That didn't happen.
That's fair.
But
Yeah.
that's what he was envisioning in his mind.
It's a fair argument. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. All right, Nate, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Tell everyone where they can find you, and I look forward to having you on again.
No, thanks for having me on. As I said, I'll be on anytime. I enjoyed talking with you. If you want to continue the conversation on Twitter, I'm at Nate Tape. I'm always talking sports, football, basketball, and anything with a ball. Actually, not all sports. It's got to have a round or egg shaped ball.
I appreciate that, Nate. Thank you.